Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Get Sheared podcast. I'm your host, Austin Creed. My friends, we're going to have a little different format for this show. I'm trying out something new. I want to have some gameplay kind of going in the background of stuff that I've been playing recently to just have a little change of pace. Try to relax you a little bit, distract you slightly, keep you engaged through this very edgy, very uncomfortable conversation that we're about to have together. Because we've lost the ability to have adult conversations in America relating to the usage of words. We've lost our ability to speak about conversationally controversial topics because people are afraid to lose their livelihood. They're afraid to offend the wrong people who will then get them canceled, who will then allow them to not make a living anymore. And then they weren't even doing anything wrong, by the way. You might be asking me what exactly I'm talking about. Oh, well, I could go down the litany. But what we'll start with today, my friends, is the term illegal alien is now becoming incredibly controversial. The term immigrant itself is becoming controversial because for some reason, the intellectual giants on the left, and I use those terms very loosely, the intellectual giants on the left wing, from the Grammys to the tenured professors at Harvard to the intellectual titans on the alphabet networks, they seem to be unable to differentiate between legal migrants and illegal aliens. Legal migrants are not the same as illegal aliens. You know who's going to be the first person to tell you that and explain the difference? Legal immigrants are going to be the first ones to tell you the difference. Know how I know that? Because I've encountered it. You act like I, myself, it's not everybody who listens to the show, but you would be forgiven for thinking that, oh, well, Austin, all you do is work in an office. You don't, work with people on the street. You don't actually interact with people outside of your, office. Well, you're wrong. In fact, I worked in construction. I worked in contracting. I work in the insurance industry. You think I don't see all the Hispanic men who work on these projects, whether they be legal or illegal? You don't think I see these things? You don't think I have any semblance of understanding who cooks in the restaurants, who does all these things? You think I don't know it? I do. But here's the difference. You are not looking at the full picture. And people, the sluts in Hollywood, the empty men, the light and the loafer schmucks on the Grammys or on the Super Bowl stage, they don't understand, and they're not going to break it down for you. All they're going to do is hit you with this anti-American rhetoric and wrap it in racism if you question them. Oh, you just don't like the Spanish-speaking Super Bowl halftime show because you're a racist. Maybe it's because I don't like Spanish being spoken in my English is my official language nation. Maybe I don't like it. And you know who also doesn't like it? A lot of Hispanic people, by the way, in case you don't know it. I always find it amusing, my friends. Why is it the first people to lecture us on racism is not the African-American gentleman or the refined African-American woman or the intellectual Hispanic man or the passionate Asian woman? It's always the white liberal communist white woman. Why is that? Why are they always the first ones to lecture us about what we should be offended by? What's the word of the week that we should be offended by? What happened in this country? What happened in this nation that everyone's so obsessed with who's in the Epstein files and who's on first base as opposed to who's destroying their nation, raiding the treasury, or who's lying to you to make millions of dollars and not billions of dollars off of the illegal immigration situation? Why do we have women, especially liberal white women, in the streets, whether they be straight or otherwise? Why are they the ones who call Trump a pedophile, a Nazi, and a rapist? And meanwhile, they're out there defending illegal aliens who human traffic children, who are sexually assaulting women. Why are they out there defending them? Why? Well, it's very simple, actually. And I'll give credit to Dr. Michael Savage, who was a radio host for a long time, and he still does his own show on YouTube and other platforms. He coined the term back in his book, Liberalism is a Mental Disorder. He was the one who first popularized that sentiment. And my friends, that is why we are living in the world we're living in today. Is because we never truly won World War II. If you really want to break it down, the U.S. never really won the war. And you might be saying, oh my God, Austin, we're going back to World War II already? You're jumping around all over the place here. Well, no, not really. And I'll explain to you why. Because everything is tied into the movement you're seeing in the streets today. The intellectuals on CNN and MSNBC, intellectuals, quote unquote, the vermin in the streets beating up ICE agents, beating up counter-protesters, defiling businesses with graffiti, breaking into people's cars, beating them up on the street. All these things are intertwined with the rhetoric that you're hearing because it all goes back to 100 years ago. 100 years ago, I need to give people a history lesson about 100 years ago. Because people don't understand history, and when people throw around terms like racist, Nazi, fascist, they don't understand the context. They don't care to explain to you the intellectual honesty or dishonesty in their sentiments. They don't care. They're throwing around hot ticket button items, and they are not wanting to break down the complexity of the issue, so I will do it for you. I will do it for you here on the Sheep Get Sheared podcast today. I'll do it for you. In the 1920s, after World War I, keep with me, I understand, that's why I have gameplay running in the background. I know you'd rather watch me solo a boss by myself on Elden Ring than listen to what I'm about to tell you because it's boring. Because you heard it in history class and you fell asleep looking at the girl next to you who had big boobs. I'll get all that. But we're gonna go ahead anyway, and if you are falling asleep, go ahead and fall asleep. But after World War I, the world treated Germany very poorly, and because of their economic hardships, they turned to a communist type of government in the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was very communistic with all the liberal spending, the transgenderism. Oh yeah, you didn't know that was happening? The gender bender revolution was happening then? Oh yes, it was. And it was, the internationalists were diving in on Wall Street. They were diving in internationally into Germany because they were being shorted. Their currency, the franc, was being destroyed. And because of that, they had to reinvent themselves. And this reinvention, instead of coming in the form of capitalism and free enterprise because of what the West had done to them, it came in the form of a mustached man from Austria who was a socialist. But instead of being an international, global socialist like you see today, which is this socialism in disguise, the same way of disguise in Russia, meaning they're socialists so they're communists and they have guns, because inherently socialism is communism without a gun. You had two major factions in Germany that were gaining momentum. You had the communists and you had the National Socialists, or the Nazis. You may not realize this because you don't listen to history. You don't actually read Mein Kampf like I have. You haven't actually listened to the speeches. And by the way, before you call me a Nazi sympathizer, I am not, by any means. To learn about the past is to avoid repeating it, in case you are ignorant and unaware. And the main difference between the two factions in Germany that were gaining momentum was that the Nazis were National Socialists versus the international communist socialists. If you actually listen to a lot of the rhetoric that was pushed during the time, which a lot of it's censored and not... The Allies should never have censored this content, by the way. That's one thing they severely messed up after the war was over. Because of all the atrocities that the Nazis committed, which they did a lot of, they did not allow their rhetoric to be discussed. They were afraid that the past would be repeated. But here's the issue. In doing so, they have unintentionally demonized, to lionized, to humanized the Nazi leadership and their rhetoric and their ideas. And that's why you see a lot of people using their rhetoric from the Soviet Union, like Zionism is racism. You ever heard that one before? It was used by the KGB. These things are all intertwined. Do you know why the Soviets and the Nazis had a non-aggression pact? Because they were very similar in their rhetoric. They were very similar. Minus the insane Jew hatred by the Nazis. They were both socialists. One was a nationalist and the other was an internationalist. That was a big difference between them. One stayed true to the more communist principles of Karl Marx, the other one split off into a more nationalist rhetoric as opposed to international communism. This is the difference that you don't understand. This is why we see a split in the right wing itself, because you have those who support Israel and those who don't. You have the more almost national socialist types and then the nationalist capitalist types. But you see, here's the issue, my friends. The issue is you don't even know this. You have not been taught the differences between these entities. All you've been taught is that there are boogeymen and there are not boogeymen. Stalin is not a boogeyman. Mao wasn't a boogeyman. Pol Pot is not a boogeyman, but Hitler is. Even though they all killed people, and the communists actually killed more people than Nazis did by a very large margin. I'm not taking away from the Holocaust at all. I am not a Holocaust denier at all. I believe the Holocaust was 100% real. It's because of that I think we need to discuss it more. Because people don't understand. The Soviets were the ones who defeated the Nazis and not Americans. We defeated the Japanese because the Japanese attacked us. Nazis didn't. In the same way that they attacked the Soviet Union. This is what you don't understand. And because of that, the Soviets gained such a foothold in Europe. That's why Europe is a socialist state. This is what you don't understand, and why I'm trying to awaken you out of your slumber so that you're aware of what's happened to you and to the countries you live in, whether you're from Germany, whether you're from America, from Spain, from France, from the UK. These are all part of your history. This is the untold truth, and the reason that we are discussing it today is because you are not allowed to say certain things. The reason why a lot of people are waging a war on words is because they want to feel better. They want to feel safer versus this tackling on hard issues that would actually make you safer. That would actually allow you to live a life that is lived with integrity and an understanding of the world and what has happened in the last 100 years. Instead of pretending to be offended by the race hustlers who lecture you about stolen land, slavery, Jim Crow, white supremacy, that's not a total myth and a lie. They lecture you about things that are not real or were real 150 years ago or 300 years ago. Instead, they would rather talk about that than about the actual communist rhetoric that took over the National Socialism, that took over the capitalists here in America under the guise of empathy and under the guise of compassion. They infiltrated us at every level, using the tactics of a man like Herbert Marcuse, who I've discussed on this show in very, very graphic detail what his plan was. His plan was, you don't need a violent revolution like you see in Cuba, like you see in Vietnam, like you see in Russia, like you see in China, like you see in Cambodia. They didn't do that. Instead, they said, you don't need to be violent. You can do it from within. You can do it through controlling education, distorting people's ethics, dumbing down the media, saturating people's mind with racism offenses, overloading the country with immigrants to disrupt the identity of the country. All these things which I've done and I've discussed before, which I might need to do again. I might need to do it again. Maybe I need to discuss it all over again, because it's all intertwined. This war on words is because we are not fighting the war on words on the right. Instead, we're giving in because we want people to feel good, not repeat history, to understand that words have power, but it's also how the words are used. How the words are used and the intent it carries with it. To discuss things in good faith is not the same as to insult someone. But of course, if you say that and say something offensive, they're more likely to just to hear what you said in the offensive term and not what you intended the offensive term to spark a conversation that you're trying to discuss in good faith. This is the issue. We can't have a conversation about the Epstein files without the Muslims pretending like they're above bar. Meanwhile, what do they need Epstein Islands for when they have Epstein countries, Epstein Middle Eastern states? What do they need an island for? All they're doing is to pick on Jews like they do every day of the week. Instead of focusing on the international socialists, communists who use their Judaism as a weapon, they focus on Israel itself, which is not an evil place by any means. But it is true that the tail wags a dog too often, and then we can have that conversation. But you see how I'm breaking down different issues and bringing them up so that you then can ask questions and have intellectually integrity-focused conversations as opposed to just clickbaiting you, as opposed to just saying something that's a hot button issue, then to just get clicks. This is why we need to have these conversations, because I want you to realize that you are being lied to and deceived under the guise of compassion and empathy. You think you're doing the right thing by being nice to people, but you're not. You're enabling them to bully you. They are attacking you with mental and verbal fascism by attempting to control you and control what you think and how you say things when you're not trying to be offensive. These are why we discuss these things on this show, because I don't want you to be fearful. You're probably a good person who's listening to the show, and you don't want to hurt people's feelings, so you enable them to censor you, to tell you can't say or talk about certain things when in fact you're not trying to do it to be mean or to be insensitive. You're trying to raise awareness for something that concerns you. This is why we need to have more conversations, not less. We raise more awareness for words, not less. My friends, I want you to understand the world you're living in so you can then decide what you want to believe about it. That's up to you. I can't control that. That's your choice. My friends, take care of yourselves amongst the sewage pipe of Hollywood that's always saturating the world. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, I'm out of here. Peace.